the celestial bodies in our world right now, what we see is that coming up in a couple of years, a very good time. And that's been sort of predicted from a lot of different strings, right? Like there's an American Indian tradition that's predicting 2020, and there are other traditions. But if you look at what happens in the planets, Saturn will be in its own house, Jupiter will be in its own house, Mars will be very beautifully placed, and there's a great opportunity, and there's a great sort of structuring for a very blessed time coming up ahead of us. But we know what happens in nature, right? Before it goes like this, it goes like this. So, so we know this because we're not dumb. We've done this before. So I'm not trying to scare people, right? This isn't like, oh no, something terrible. No, it's that forewarned is forearmed. And one of the reasons that the collapsing side of the process has been identified as not positive is because so many times it takes people by surprise. So many times, if the awareness is gripped by the relative, the idea that the relative has to break down a bit in order to give rise to a point of transition, then unless always when we go into the transition, we're dealing with the unknown at its maximum value of unknownness. So as the collapse comes in, and we're facing the unknown, there's an element of uncertainty of whether I have all the resources I need to deal with that. So that's where energy healing comes in. Energy healing provides resources. All right. So, oh yes, one more point. The universe is perfect in function. Oh, that's a quote. Does everybody see it says MMY? That's a quote from Maharishi. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, so human nervous systems designed to experience life in a sequential manner. The universe is complete in its totality. So we have the unique and extremely important position of providing a perspective on the whole universe for divine being as ourselves. Divine being as ourselves gets a chance to experience the universe, what it doesn't know, the surprises, the learning experiences. Okay, so now I'm just going to do a scan through this whole situation, because what we have coming up is we only know a certain amount. We know that there's a good time coming. We know that there's this big kind of scintillation of energy on Earth right now with lots and lots of people becoming interested in spiritual topics, wanting to become more conscious, wanting to awaken. And at the same time, there are certain factors that are present that have the potential to create a chaos or havoc, to wreak some sort of havoc. And so we are in a unique position in our healing circle here. And I'm feeling, by the way, the capability and the profoundness of the healing energies tonight, just so tangibly and so palpably. So I feel as if we're ready. This is a dance class, and it's like, okay, teacher, let's put on the music and let's dance. So okay, let's do this. So we're just going to go in, and we're just going to go in and look. So all I'm doing is I'm just looking at the situation from my perspective and getting to be your voice. And I go into silence, and I tell you what I'm doing, because that's how I do it. The first thing I'm feeling is a degree of grief. And that doesn't surprise me, because anytime there's a really major transition, there's always something that's lost in order for something else to emerge and be gained. And always that thing that's lost is like, again, to quote Maharishi, oh, my hut. It's always the hut that you're losing. And yet, to trade it off for the castle, right? But the thing is that even that, there were memories in the hut. There were moments that were significant or meaningful or important, even in the hut. So I'm just looking at that element there, because that's a blocking element, and it's in the collective. It's not in us. You guys are ready to move, but it's in the collective. So we, as our collective, our little healing collective, our grand little healing collective, is looking at the field of the human collective and looking at that element of attachment to what was, or there's an illusion under the grief, and the illusion is, oh, well, everything could just stay the same. Nope, it doesn't. It's not going to stay, no matter what we do, it's not going to happen. So yeah, we can just, that illusion needs to erase. That idea that, oh, well, I could just somehow organize things so nothing ever changes, and I'll just sit here on my couch and be happy for the rest of my life. No, it doesn't work that way. So going into the couch, going to the couch for people, all the people with the couch. And there is fear. Fear is under that. So I'm just reading it to you guys. So we're analyzing it now, right? Every time we find a piece, we go into silence, then we find another piece, then we go into, this is the algorithm, right? I just talked about it. So we found there was the grief, and then under that there was the attachment, and now under that there's fear. And I'm looking at the fear. The fear is, of course, dealing with the unknown. Fine. So checking where it is. I'm feeling that deep in the core of people's physiologies. And it almost feels like maybe it's in the spine or something. It feels like deep in the core. And for those of you who are new to these energy healing seminars, the way I'm reading that is I put my awareness, I just ask innocently, where is it? And then I let the awareness fall into silence. And then some area lights up. Our bodies, our amazing, divine, incredible bodies have this capacity or ability to reflect divinity. They are made bilaterally symmetrical for a reason, because that gives us the two sides, like the two strokes of the divine dialogue. And so we can read off of our own physiology. So I can feel it. I checked it once, I checked it twice, 3 times. It's in the core. Okay, good. I'm asking, is it in the cord of light, or is it actually in the physical nervous system? Now we're looking at the whole of the human collective. So what I'm getting is a rather spectrum. It's a spectrum, but for most people, and the area it looks like that we need to look at is the actual physical nervous system. So I'm asking then what we need to do. The fear is in the wiring in the nervous system. It's in the wiring. And there's an element of ego that's connected with that. The ego is there to protect, to a certain degree. I mean, that's why we have egos, is to be able to make decisions that are in favor of our own perpetuation of life. That's not a bad thing. I mean, in some spiritual circles, people are, feel like the ego is blocking me from my enlightenment or something. But ultimately, all the bits and pieces of self merge with totality. And so it's not so much necessarily a matter of throwing things out as it is a matter of embracing and integrating them into the larger scheme of self. Anyway, in the ego, the fear, as soon as we put the attention in there in the nervous system and the fear starts to move around a little bit, it starts to loosen up. Under that, this ego comes forward, and the ego is connected to and associated with early childhood experiences. That it seems to be a common pattern on Earth, that many children have this moment where they feel as if they want to fit into society, but in order to do that, they have to give up something of their divine connection. And that's pretty much across the board. Like in all cultures, there's a point. Most children are socialized between like ages 2 and 3, around there. By the time you get to 4, they have to be mostly socialized at that point, otherwise there's trouble. So it's around there. It's around that 2 and 3-year-old point. And that's that's kind of like considered the terrible twos. And it's always a challenge for parents to figure out how to manage that part of the parenting process. So what's happening, what I'm feeling is a beautiful infusion from the gap, because remember, mother, that's like the first relationship, right? Is the relationship of divine being to its own nature. And our individual, we are the expressions, we are the antennas, right, of divine being. So it's our relationship with our own nature is right in that gap. And in that gap, that relationship resides in perfection. So from that gap, blueprints or templates can be extracted, which are full of knowledge and understanding for the parents. And we can do this for the generations. I can see that. It wants to open up like that. This is because we have such a big group, we can expand it. So it's going for the generations 5, 6, 7, 8. Can we go more than 8? It looks like we can go up to 12 generations. Can we go more than 12? It looks like 12 feels full. That feels to me like that's good. 12 is good. So we're going to go back 12 generations, not in every single case. In every single case, it could be slightly different. But we're going back at least about 12 generations for most people. And what we're doing is I'm watching and reporting. But as a group, we're also kind of watching and reporting that through us, through our DNA. Can you feel your DNA? That's pretty fine. That's a bit of a stretch, right? Like, how small can I feel? The eye can see a single photon. That's pretty small. That's smaller than a DNA. But we go in and there's a place I call the archive of the ancestors. And I identify the collective, well, let's see, here's my microphone. Okay, I identify the collective, this is the y-axis here, everybody, right? So I identify the collective levels of self here at the causal. So we've got the 2 values of the gap here of infinity, and then the finest relative level of manifested self is where we find all of our collective versions of our being, realms of creation, and the different, we could say races of subtle beings or something like that, but it's all part of the self. It's all found within these physiologies. This is the beauty of the human physiology. It's such a gift. It's such a gift. It's such a gift. Sorry. Okay, I had to tell that to somebody. Okay, so the archive of the ancestors, it's part of our collective self. We're going to feel that just for a second. Part of our collective self, the archive of the ancestors. It has an energy signature that's unique in each person. This love, there's a quality of wisdom and love combined that's part of the nature of that gap. And it's been moving all this time out, all this time I was talking about all this stuff, out into the more relative levels of the physiology. And it's communicating to the ancestors. It starts out like a little seed or a little thread of information, and then it just expands as it moves in each individual. As it starts to unfurl within their being, within their physiology, it becomes enriched. And I'm asking, why is it doing that? And what I'm getting back is because it's fueled by the love that's in that gap, which has a quality of infinity. Everything in the absolute is infinite, right? Infinite, eternal, absolute. So that infinity is behind it. So even something that comes out like a little stream, just like the way little streams can carve big canyons, right? Same thing. You think, oh, it's just a little soft piece of water. What can that do to a big, hard, million-year-old rock or something? But yeah, it can do a lot. So I'm tracing it with my awareness. I'm just tracing the flow of that beautiful, potent, like concentrated quality of consciousness which comes out of that gap of the perfect relationship and moves into the finest relative level of the physiology, speaking to the molecules of the body, right? Speaking to the DNA and supporting the intelligence of the DNA. The DNA could be one of possibly the most intelligent parts of our bodies, which I'm just thinking that right now. I mean, all the parts of our bodies are pretty smart, but I'm thinking the DNA has a kind of special quality about it, doesn't it? It's like, it's already a kind of compactified wisdom in its own nature, you know, so we're taking it anyway. So that compactified wisdom meets compactified wisdom in the DNA, the archive of the ancestors. And there, with, as it starts to move in there, there's a kind of scintillating quality that's also, I would say, blissful. And I'm using that word kind of carefully because it probably means different things to different people. But there's a quality of, there's a great force of life force behind it. Like I'm still feeling this energy rising through the physiology, and it's still expanding as it goes. And what's causing it to expand is this quality of a kind of a quality of bliss. That's probably the best word to describe it. But it could also be broken down into a mix of love and wisdom, which is also a very yummy kind of mixture. And I'm asking about this because this word bliss came up. I'm asking about the relationship between this particular flow of healing energy that's coming forward and the dopaminergic system in the brain, because we're working with the nervous system as well, right? And the dopaminergic system is that part, for those of you who are not sure, at the top of the brain stem, there is a little area called the ventral tegmental area, and also the substantia nigra is a little organ in there, and they're responsible for producing neurochemicals and hormones that are particularly dopamine, which creates bliss in the physiology. And I'm feeling as if my awareness is scanning through, our awareness is scanning through that system. It's an important system because it's responsible for the motivation that keeps us moving forward on any, you know, it's on any project, but particularly for the support of our world. We're doing world healings tonight. This is so wonderful, but for ourselves too, because we all get the benefit. So looking into the dopaminergic pathways. Oh, okay. So thank you. Beautiful. So every time we're making a sentence, every time a concept comes up, it falls back into that gap and it reawakens that flow of perfect relationship. Ideal first relationship. Mother's the first relationship. And it's like mother in its her most ideal form. Perfection. Right there. And then that, every time it comes up, it's like it really is reminding me of a river running through a canyon. You know, first time just a few drops, and you think, oh, that's not going to do anything. But the next time it's double that much, and the next time triple that much, and the next time quadruple and quintuple and so forth. And it builds in a consistent manner. And I'm just reading this off of what we are doing, you guys. We are that river. We are the transformation. That's how it is. This is the energy healing, is that it supports the ability to re-identify oneself. Like this relationship that we have with ourself, of who we think we are, is the foundation for our ability to harness our own energy healing potential to its maximum capacity. That ability to harness your full potential to heal yourself through consciousness, looping in on itself over and over. That's all we're doing, is looping consciousness around, is based on each person's individual sense of self. Because if you think, well, I'm useless and I'm helpless and I can't do anything, and she's seeing all this weird stuff and I can't see any of it, and I'm like, then that's what you get. That's what you made. That's what you made. Because all of us are creators. We're creating every second, every single thing. We've created it. There's no part of you that's not creating every single nuance of your universe, like right now. So it's okay if the habits are there, but what we're doing is we're going into where those habits are now. Instead of looking so much in the physiology, some of this with the habits and the thought patterns and the deep root thought patterns of being kind of, well, that's being humble, right? Like I'm humbling myself because I'm not very good, really. And if somebody says I'm good, I'll always say, oh, shucks, no, I'm not, So, right? It's just like a habit, right? So those come from the ancestors. That's why we're doing these healings for the ancestors, because we're helping our own. It's like we're lifting our own selves up from the inside out. We're helping our ancestors redefine themselves. And as they do that, it's going to be a lot easier for them to navigate through those difficult parenting years when children are learning to socialize. From that point, it just keeps getting easier. The older the kids get, the easier it gets, usually. Knock on wood. I love it. My laugh track is live. Sorry. Anyway, I love you guys. Okay. So I'm just feeling into the system again. Basically, we're lifting ourselves up, but as we lift ourselves up, all this big collective is coming with us. And as we're doing that, that wholeness of creation, that totality, that big source of creation self is also feeling the uplift. It's experiencing it through our collective. So that's where this lovely kind of incremental and kind of delicate continuum of the healing starts to kick in. It has to be a natural process, because, thank you to my friend who's in the chat there, for bringing my awareness to a verse of the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, which is chapter 6, verse 25, that if the process isn't very natural, then any kind of like forcing it or straining or trying to make it happen actually detracts from the effectiveness. So this is where, in this, and I'm just reading this off of what's happening with our group, this is where our process becomes stabilized and integrated, becomes very gentle, but incrementally kind of relentless, kind of a consistent. We're moving forward now, like gently in steps. And I'm realizing something about that verse, by the way, which is that the reason that the progress has to be incremental is because the quality of being in that gap, which is responsible for the healing process, is so tender and it's so delicate that if the process isn't incremental, the delicacy could be lost, because it's worth preserving. It's so precious. It's so tender, and it's so great in its effect when it comes out to the relative level of expression. It's, a little bit of patience here at the beginning gives rise to something that's manifesting in a really grand and glorious and incredible form at the surface. So let's just review for a second. We're in our healing group. We've been doing this big healing for the collective of our world. It's founded on this relationship of perfection. it's designed, the intention, the sankalp, or the intention behind it, is to support a condition for our forward progress as a race of humans on this beautiful, really sweet planet, really nice planet we live, as we move through a period which is possibly has the potential to be a little bit rough before it gets really good, right? So it's really good is coming up about 2 years from now. And I was going to put that question out there, if anybody knows approximately when in 2020. Anybody? When in 2020 that happens? It's going to happen sometime in 2020. Anyway, so between now and then, we have to get through a period of more dynamic transition than usual. So what that means is that we're actually going to be in this period that's deep down at the deeper end of this cycle of evolution or transformation, right down at that. That's why we're here examining this little gap, this very fine gap. Actually, it's infinite, right? Because it's in the absolute. So it's massive. It's bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest at the same time. Okay, so that's our review. So we have that. Now what I want to do is I just want to take a moment of silence again, offering it back into the silence, and see what comes out. So the first thing that I'm feeling coming out is a wave of exceedingly tender sweetness and softness. So that's, I see. So this wave of exceedingly tender sweetness and softness is a kind of a light medicine, which is radiating from our group, the center of our group, out into the collective, for the sake of creating a bed or a platform for progress that will be sustainable. And it will be able to perpetuate and maintain the delicacy and the tenderness of that gap. So we should offer that softness back again to being. So it makes a loop. It's making a loop out, and it's making, this is interesting, okay? Because every time we offer to being, we get more information. So it makes a loop out, and it touches into our healing circle, to everyone's Hriddya Mahamarma, which is right in your heart area. It's the big energy center right in the heart. And that's different from the heart chakra, which is kind of a smaller thing. The Hriddya Mahamarma is like it's like the whole chest area. So it's folding up into that Mahamarma, and then it falls back into the silence. And then it's another wave of it is coming. And with this second wave, I'm feeling a kind of expansion of the energy through the tissues of the body into the like all the muscle tissues and skin and bones and fat and organs, but mostly around the chest and torso area. Offering it again. This time it comes back, and there is a frequency of sound with it. And I'm realizing that the waves of exquisite music ride on this particular energy frequency. So for some people on our earth, it's coming forward as an impulse that inspires beauty, and probably in other areas other than just music. But I'm kind of tuned to that. Dropping into the silence again. Coming back out again. Okay, now an upgrade is occurring for our group, our healing group. And this looks like, I'm actually seeing what looks like flow of light medicine in the head. So we had, there was an upgrade for the Hriddya Mahamarma. Now there's an upgrade for the Shiro. I think it's Shiro Mahamarma, I think. Yeah. We already work with the dopaminergic pathways, but now also the pineal gland. This softness is continuing as I'm speaking. It's continuing to fall back into the silence and come back out to the relative. So it's continuing, it's like a little rocking the cradle, right? But as it does that, this light energy is being produced for the head area. And I'm seeing for everybody in our circle. And this is what I'm starting to understand what's happening, is that the healing that we're doing right now is an upgrade for all of our own capacity to perform energy healing work, because we've come to a point where the collective consciousness of humanity was like, whoa, that was a lot. We just went through a big transformation. We need to do incremental, gentle changing. And so what we're doing is we're upgrading our own capacity so that we can come at it again from like a higher level of capability. Nice. Now, of course, now that I have that idea, I'm anticipating, well, the next one's the Basti Mahamarma, right? But we'll see. We mustn't jump to conclusions. We'll see what happens. Because the head is still waking. There's still some waking up happening in the head. And I'm also seeing, I'm double checking back in the Hriddaya Mahamarma, in the heart Mahamarma. All right. Yes, it is going to the gut. That's the next area. It gets the wake up. Oh, there are a lot of, I don't know about you guys, but I know for me, that's an area sometimes where stuff gets stored. We store some of our more like personal, like different stuff in that area. So as the light starts to move into that area of the physiology, there's a lot of like identity issues connected to and associated. We think of our biggest identity issues probably associated with a face, right? Because that's how we recognize people. So it's like the main way that we think of, when I think of me, I usually think of my face first, right? But there's a certain level of identification with all the parts of the hip and torso and pelvic area, partly because it's our foundation. The whole torso, the whole rest of the body kind of sits there. So it's the first part, it's the foundation, we're going into like a more intimate level as a group. And this is very interesting. It's an interesting dynamic that I'm seeing. I don't think our group has ever done this before, that we've had a healing that works on a part of the physiology that pretty much everybody in the group has some little hesitations or some little boundaries or something there, in that too many Disney movies where people get hit in the butt, they kick them in the butt and then the laugh track comes in, it's too many. So it's like it got deep into our awareness, into our memory banks, that whole thing. So I think that's what's clearing in the torso, pelvis, abdominal area. Is there are, I would say, okay, I'm searching for a word, you guys. It's like, I can't think of it, but it's like preconceived ideas, kind of like that. Preconceived, that's not quite the word I'm looking for. That's too many words, but you get the idea.
But denial.
Well, denial is very much one of the energies that's moving in there. But I'm thinking of something like when you have an idea about like somebody of another race and you think, oh, well, they're from that race, therefore they are, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like a preconceived idea. It's like an assumption kind of. But there's certain assumptions that we have about that part of the body. But yeah, and one of them certain
prejudice.
Kind of, yeah. I think prejudice is that's pretty close. I think that might be the word I'm looking for, prejudice. Precognitive agreement based on conditioning. Thank you. That's a good one. We are doing this together. Beautiful. Thank you. So Yeah, prejudice about that whole torso, butt, hips, reproductive organs, elimination, all that stuff. So under that is fear. So clearing the fear, because and this came up right at the beginning as the light started moving into this whole torso area, was that, well, if there's some transformation on this part of the physiology, well, you just don't know what's going to happen. Like all of what we know to be order in culture is just going to fall away, and we're going to be thrown into chaos. Well, maybe. but we have to not be afraid to be thrown into chaos. And anyway, it's not like things are perfect in there anyway right now. So there's a lot of forgiveness moving, and I'm seeing energy that's moving across the hip area like that, the pelvis area like that. It's moving across the meridians, the energy meridians in the hip. So it's moving like this through this area. And again, it's a kind of a rocking. And with it is a stability. Thank you. And the stability comes from that perfect relationship. So we're getting stability. And in the lower back, and it's working, I'm seeing for a lot of people here, we're working with the spine and the muscles and the discs and all the connective tissue around the spine and the back, the middle of the back. Rigidity is not a requirement for enlightenment. Yeah, well put. I'm reading you guys the comments that are coming up. People are making comments. Well, one person's making comments. I love you. Thank you. Thank you for right in there, man. And every one of them is flame on too. So I really appreciate it. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. So a really beautiful question just came in, and that is, will pelvic area healing open financial abundance? Speaking of our foundations, right? Because it's like, in this world, that's how it manifests. That's how letting go of the rigidity and we're still with the ancestors. I'm telling you, the ancestors had a lot of taboos, right? They had a lot of feelings of shame and embarrassment, and we can make a laundry list there. So as that's working for us, as this energy is it's moving really innocently, it's just in the space, and it's coming in as a kind of loving wisdom that wakes up self-identification in that area. Like, what am I really? Like, what am I? Like, what is this part of me? So that part's waking up to its own full potential. That every particle of our bodies is divine expression. It is God expressing itself, right? So there's infinite potential in every single part. And so besides the kind of washing, this light, this loving wisdom, it's washing away those discordant feelings, particularly for the ancestors. It's also supporting a greater comprehension, a clear comprehension and flexibility of self as the impetus of the transition. That's what's there in that gap. It's the impetus for the transition is the first tiny, delicate, tender, subtle expression of consciousness.